The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, full of unimaginable wonders and terrifying threats. But nothing prepared the inhabitants of Earth for the sudden transmission they would receive, an urgent, desperate distress call that seemed to echo through the vast emptiness of space. The message came through a wideband signal, transmitted on frequencies Earth's scientists had only recently begun to understand. It was meant for someone else, someone far away. But by an accidental twist of fate, the transmission reached Earth. The source was the Thalren, an ancient and highly advanced alien race. Known for their mastery over technology and their peaceful ways, but their world, once a flourishing hub of knowledge and innovation, was now on the brink of collapse. The Thalren were being hunted, not by another civilization, but by a terrifying species known as the Zalthor. The Zalthor were not just conquerors, they were predators, fierce and unrelenting, with a reputation for destroying entire worlds. Planet by planet, the Zalthar left only destruction in their wake, wiping out anything that stood in their path. The Thalren, despite their advanced technology, were helpless against the Zalthor's relentless onslaught. The message was brief, direct, and chilling. Help. We are under attack by the Zalthor. Only a species capable of surviving on a death world may stand a chance. Please, any who can hear this, we need your help. The Thalren had been fighting a losing battle for years, but their last-ditch hope lay in this strange, desperate appeal. They didn't know who would hear it, but they knew their time was running out. The very survival of their species depended on the intervention of a race capable of surviving a death world, a planet filled with extreme danger, where life itself fought to exist. A death world. For the Thalren, it was a term that symbolized an environment so hostile that only the strongest life forms could endure it. The message, sent out of desperation, reached Earth as a simple transmission at first, a strange signal barely understood by anyone. But when Earth's communication experts decoded it, the implications were clear. The Thalren weren't looking for just any help. They needed something extraordinary. They needed Deathworlders. To most of the world, the idea of a death world was little more than a theoretical concept. It was a term used by a few scientists and explorers to describe the most hostile planets known in the galaxy. Planets where even the most basic survival was a constant battle. But to humans, it was something far more personal. Humans were known across the galaxy as Deathworlders. It was a name they had earned not through conquest or warfare, but through survival. Earth was a planet where life was harsh, where every step outside a city could mean an encounter with a deadly predator, toxic atmosphere, or extreme weather. Humanity had thrived in the harshest conditions on Earth and space, and even on hostile colonies far from home. The message sent to Earth was not just a cry for help. It was a call for a species that could stand against the Zalthor. The Thalren didn't know it, but they had just reached out to the very species capable of facing down such a challenge. However, that didn't mean Earth's leaders were eager to respond. The governments of Earth were in turmoil as the message spread. Some believed that humanity should stay out of the galactic conflict, that intervening in alien affairs could bring untold dangers. Others saw the call as an opportunity, a chance to prove humanity's worth and strength to the galaxy. But a debate soon emerged. Was it right to involve Earth in the Thalren's fight, a war that could cost countless human lives? Or should they ignore the call, preserving Earth's safety at the cost of an entire species? Discussions took place behind closed doors. The news leaked to the public. The world watched with bated breath as the governance of Earth, each with its own opinion, began to deliberate. Some factions were passionately in favor of action. They believed humanity had a responsibility to help those in need, especially if it meant showing the galaxy that Earth was not a planet to be trifled with. Others, however, took a more cautious approach. Why should we risk our lives for an alien species, they asked. We don't even know if they can be trusted. But there were others who, more than anyone else, saw an opportunity in the Thalren's plea. They were the survivors, the explorers, the soldiers, the adventurers, who had lived through the dangers of Earth's most hostile environments. They had survived storms that could tear buildings apart, faced animals that could kill with a single strike, and braved wildernesses so deadly that no one dared venture into them. To them, this distress call wasn't a question of trust or ethics. It was a call to arms, a call to show the galaxy what humanity was capable of. The people who had built Earth's thriving cities had done so because they had conquered their world's deadliest challenges. Now it was time for them to face something even greater, and so, as humanity's leaders debated their course of action, the public was divided. A sense of tension gripped the world, and the once peaceful inhabitants of Earth found themselves drawn into a cosmic conflict that had nothing to do with them, yet everything to do with their future. Finally, the decision was made. Earth would respond. United Earth Coalition, an alliance of Earth's greatest military powers, began the preparations for an expedition to the Thauran homeworld. They would send a fleet to answer the distress call, to face whatever danger awaited them, and to do what humanity had always done: best survive. The story was only beginning. The Thauron's message had been received, and the stage was set for humanity to enter a galactic conflict. But the question remained: could they, the Deathworlders, really stand up to the Zalthar? Would they live up to the legend, or would this be the one battle humanity could not win? The galaxy would soon find out. Earth had never been a peaceful place, but it was that very hardship that had shaped humanity into something different. Now, the best and brightest from every corner of the planet were called upon to answer the Thauran's distress call. The United Earth Coalition gathered a diverse team: military experts, brilliant scientists, engineers, and the survivalists who had once faced the deadliest corners of Earth and come out alive. These people, forged by the planet's harshest environments, were humanity's true strength, the Deathworlders. The leader of this mission was Captain Kai Xander, a name well known in military circles. Xander was a man who had spent more of his life on hostile planets than on Earth itself. His decorated career was built on survival, surviving every kind of combat, every type of terrain, and every form of danger known to man. He wasn't just a leader. He was a symbol of humanity's resilience, a testament to the strength Earth's people could summon when faced with the impossible. A nonsense leader, Xander had a single goal: to win, no matter the cost. The mission was clear: answer the Thauran's call and fight the Zalthar. To do this, the humans needed more than just weapons. They needed to adapt, to be able to survive in alien environments and face the unknown. That's why the Resolve, a massive multi-purpose vessel designed to endure the most hostile conditions, was chosen for the mission. Originally built for deep space exploration and extreme terrain expeditions, the Resolve was retrofitted for this daunting task, armed with the latest technology, capable of supporting the entire team for months at a time in the deadliest corners of the galaxy. The ship, towering and sturdy, was more than a vessel. It was a symbol of humanity's grit. Xander and his team of elite soldiers, engineers, and explorers began their training on the Resolve. They were well aware of the enormity of their task. The Thauran were asking them to fight a species that had left entire planets in ruins. The Zalthar were described as almost unstoppably relentless, highly adaptive predator species that lived for one thing: to destroy. The galaxy had encountered them before, but none had lived to tell the tale. This mission, some feared, could be humanity's first true test in space, a test of survival like never before. Xander and his team drilled in simulation after simulation, each designed to mimic the harshest scenarios they could imagine: hostile alien atmospheres, ambushes, survival on planets teeming with hostile fauna, and combat situations where victory was far from guaranteed. It was grueling work, but every soldier, every explorer, and every scientist knew that it wasn't just the Thauron's future on the line, it was humanity's. As the team prepared, they were briefed on the Zalthar and their tactics. The Zalthar weren't like any enemy the humans had faced before. They were a hunter, species tough, relentless, and terrifyingly intelligent. These predators didn't rely on sheer numbers, but on their ability to strike quickly and efficiently, often using tactics that were foreign to conventional warfare. Zalthar could adapt to almost any environment, learning from every encounter. That made them almost impossible to predict. Even more dangerous than the most fearsome Earth predators, What struck Xander the most, though, was the Thalrin's reluctance to trust the humans fully. The Thalrin were a peaceful race, more accustomed to diplomacy than warfare, and they feared what humanity might bring to the table. The Zalthar were a threat to them, but so were humanity's reputation and unpredictability. The Thalrin had sent the distress call in desperation, but they had no real understanding of what the Deathworlders were capable of. To them, humans were little more than aggressive, unrefined newcomers to a galaxy that had known peace for millennia. Despite their doubts, the Thalrin had no choice but to place their trust in the humans. Their own forces had been decimated, and the Zalthar showed no signs of slowing their attack. If humanity didn't succeed, it was unlikely anyone else would. Met with the Thalrin's representative, a diplomat named Alira, aboard the Resolve just before departure. Her golden eyes shimmered with suspicion, but she knew the stakes. "I don't trust your kind," she said quietly, the words barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. "You humans are unpredictable, and you fight differently. You will not follow our ways." Xander looked at her with a steady gaze. "We don't need to follow your ways. We need to survive." The conversation was brief, but it underscored the tension between the two species. The Thalrin had their own methods based on centuries, a peaceful existence and diplomatic negotiations. But humanity, Xander knew, had no time for diplomacy when the stakes were this high. This wasn't about discussions or treaties. This was about survival. And humans had been surviving for a very long time. As the Resolve prepared to depart, Xander looked out from the ship's observation deck at the stars. Earth was behind them, and ahead lay the unknown. The galaxy, once a place of distant fascination, was now a battleground. The humans had to prove their worth not just to the Thalron, but to the entire galaxy. But as Xander's mind raced with calculations and strategies, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary mission. The Zalthar weren't like anything humanity had faced before. They were predators, and they would stop at nothing to hunt their prey. In the distance, the Thalrin homeworld beckoned. And beyond that, the Zalthar waited, silent, deadly, and waiting to see if humanity had what it took to survive. For Xander and his team, failure was not an option. But deep inside, there was a sense of unease. The Deathworlders had always survived Earth's harshest challenges, but could they survive the Zalthar? With the mission underway, the true test was about to begin. Would humanity's strength be enough, or would this mission be their last? The Resolve entered the Thalrin system with a quiet hum, its engines working steadily as the crew prepared for what lay ahead. Through the ship's massive observation windows, Captain Xander and his team gazed upon the Thalrin homeworld. Planet was a breathtaking sight, lush. Jungles stretched out over miles of land. Vast oceans sparkled under a gentle sun, and towering mountain ranges seemed to rise out of the horizon like the spines of some ancient beast. To the Thalrin, this was paradise, a home they had cultivated for millennia, full of beauty and life. But as Xander looked down at the vibrant planet, he could feel the tension in the air. The Thalrin were silent, their dignified faces giving little away, but their nervousness was palpable. As the Resolve descended toward the planet's surface, an eerie quiet settled over the crew. The beautiful landscape below, once a symbol of hope, now seemed to hide a darker reality. The Thalrin had been fighting a battle for months, but the war had already taken a devastating toll as the humans disembarked and made their way to the Thalrin's capital city. It didn't take long for the scale of the destruction to become clear. Capital was in ruins, buildings collapsed, streets scorched, and the once bustling markets now eerily quiet. The Thalrin had already lost much of their territory. With Zalthar forces sweeping through their colonies like a storm, Xander's team quickly set up base in the city, and their first briefing was grim. The Zalthar had adapted to every defense the Thalrin had put up. Their ships were not only massive but highly agile, capable of landing on the planet's surface to hunt down and eliminate Thalrin outposts with terrifying precision. The Thalrin had not been able to keep up. Now it was up to humanity to try and turn the tide. As Xander and his team prepared for their first confrontation with the Zalthar, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The Zalthar were unlike any enemy humanity had faced. They were not simply monstrous predators. They were ruthless, calculating, and disturbingly intelligent. These were creatures who understood their environment, adapted to it, and used it to their advantage. It was not the Zalthars' physical size or strength that made them dangerous. It was their cold, methodical approach to hunting. The first encounter came sooner than anyone expected. A series of loud, echoing thuds vibrated through the city as a fleet of Zalthar ships descended from the sky, landing with a brutal efficiency on the outskirts of the capital. Without hesitation, Xander led his team into the fray. The initial clash was chaotic. The Zalthar moved like shadows, blending with the surroundings, their advanced cloaking technology rendering them nearly invisible in the thick jungle environment. Despite their superior numbers and intimidating size, the humans fought back with everything they had. Xander's crew was well trained, but it became clear that the Zalthars' tactics were unlike anything the humans had anticipated. They didn't charge headlong into battle. They waited, they observed, and when the time was right, they struck with precision. In the first few hours, the humans faced setbacks. The Zalthar were too adaptable, shifting their strategy as quickly as the humans could react. But Xander, with his years of experience on Earth's most dangerous worlds, understood something that the Thalrin did not. Survival wasn't about brute strength or advanced technology alone. It was about adapting. Humanity had survived Earth's harshest environments, not by following a set plan, but by constantly thinking on their feet, adjusting and improvising in the heat of battle. Xander's team took the initiative. Using their knowledge of extreme terrain combat, they lured the Zalthar into traps, exploiting weaknesses in the predator's methods. The jungles of the Thalrin world, once a beautiful maze of greenery, became the perfect battleground for guerrilla tactics. The humans used their surroundings to their advantage, setting up ambushes and using the dense underbrush to hide their movements. Every skirmish was a test of ingenuity. Xander's soldiers, previously trained for war on Earth's unpredictable landscapes, were now applying their experience to a world far more dangerous than any human battlefield. The Zalthar, relentless as they were, began to struggle. They had adapted to fight in the Thalran cities, but this was a new kind of combative battlefield the Zalthar had never encountered. The humans knew how to survive in hostile environments, how to move silently, and how to make the most of limited resources. The first few victories, though small, began to turn the tide. The Zalthar, always able to adapt to their prey, found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't predict. Humanity had a different kind of resourcefulness, a raw, primal ability to improvise and learn quickly. The Thalran, observing the human tactics, were both impressed and stunned. The Zalthar's ability to adapt had always made them nearly unbeatable. But the humans were doing something the Thalran had never seen before. The humans didn't just react to the Zalthar's moves. They anticipated them, countered them, and turned the environment against the enemy. They were relentless, not just in their strength, but in their ability to think beyond the expected. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The Zalthar were still a terrifying force, and every victory came at a cost. As the humans and Thalran pushed back the predator forces, Xander knew that the war was far from over. The Zalthar were learning from their encounters with the humans, adapting once again to the changing battlefield. The balance of power was shifting, but not yet decisively. Humanity's resourcefulness had earned them some hard-won victories, but the true battle had just begun. Still, Xander couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The humans were not only surviving, they were proving to the galaxy that they were more than just Deathworlders. They were fighters, they were survivors. And for the first time since the Zalthar began their assault, it seemed like the Thalran might have a chance at survival thanks to the human spirit of adaptability and resilience. The war had only just begun, but the humans had already shown the galaxy that they were not a species to be underestimated. The war against the Zalthar raged on. The humans were starting to gain ground. Every victory was hard-won, every skirmish a test of their ingenuity and adaptability. Yet, as the tide slowly began to turn, the Thalran revealed a secret that would change everything. the SYMBIONT. At first, Captain Xander thought it was just another Thalrun weapon, new kind of technology, or perhaps some secret fleet. But the truth was far more complicated. The symbiont was not a machine or a ship, was an ancient organic entity, one that had been kept hidden for centuries. The Thalrun had discovered it long ago, but in their wisdom, they had chosen to keep it secret. Why? Because it was dangerous. The symbiont had the power to enhance its host's physical and mental abilities, turning them into something more than human. It could make its host stronger, faster, and smarter, perhaps even more than a match for the relentless Zalthar. However, there was a catch. The symbiont required constant mental control. Its influence could slowly alter the host's thoughts, emotions, and even their very personality. It could grant extraordinary power, but at the cost of the host's humanity. As the Zalthar continued their assault, the Thalrun, desperate and cornered, offered the symbiont to Captain Xander and his team. The offer was both a blessing and a curse. Xander, ever the pragmatist, understood the risk. The Thalrun had kept this power hidden for a reason, and yet he knew that humanity's fight for survival had reached a critical point. There was no time for hesitation. If the symbiont could give them the edge they needed to defeat the Zalthar, then it had to be tried. Xander agreed to the procedure. The Thalrun scientists and healers worked quickly, and soon the symbiont was introduced into his body. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, a flood of sensation exploded within him. His muscles burned with newfound strength, his reflexes became lightning fast, and his mind began to operate at a level far beyond human capacity. He could think faster, analyze situations in seconds, and process information with uncanny accuracy. At first, it was exhilarating. He felt more alive, more powerful than he had ever been. But that feeling quickly turned into something else. A strange presence seemed to settle in his mind, a voice just on the edge of his consciousness, pushing him to be more, do more. Was the symbiont, silently whispering suggestions, urging him to take control, to dominate, to win at any cost. The first few days were a blur of extraordinary physical feats and sharp tactical victories. Xander's team marveled at his newfound abilities. His orders were executed with a precision that had seemed impossible before. The symbiont's influence made him a better leader, a better strategist, but at a cost. There was a subtle change in the way he viewed the world. He became more focused on the objective, less empathetic, and more willing to take risks. His sense of urgency grew, and with it, a growing sense of isolation. The more he used the symbiont, the more it began to take over. Xander started to notice changes in his own thoughts. His patience with his team began to wear thin. Decisions, once carefully considered, now felt more instinctive, driven by a raw need to win. He started to see people not as allies, but as tools to be used in the war against the Zalthar. His once steady hand began to shake with the strain of keeping control. The voice in his mind, soft at first, now grew louder, more insistent. It told him that victory was everything, that anything, even his humanity, was worth sacrificing for. The cause. One night, after a particularly brutal battle against the Zalthar, Xander stood alone on the observation deck of the Resolve, looking out at the planet below. The stars stretched out before him, an endless expanse of possibility. But all he could hear was the voice of the symbiont in his head, urging him to take more, to do more, to push harder. "You can be more than human, Captain," it whispered. Could be unstoppable. Xander clenched his fists, fighting against the pull. He understood why the Thalrun had kept the symbiont secret. It was more than just a weapon, it was a temptation, a way to lose yourself in the pursuit of power. He was no longer sure if he was the one in control. Was he still the man who had led humanity into this war? Or was he becoming something else entirely? The soldiers on the ground, the scientists, even the Thalrun, they all relied on him. But Xander knew that if he let the symbiont consume him, he might lose everything that made him human. The Zalthar were a threat, but they were not the only enemy he faced. The true battle was inside him. Meanwhile, the team continued to make progress. The symbiont's power, despite its dangers, gave them an edge over the Zalthor that humanity desperately needed. Xander's team, emboldened by their leader's transformation, began to push the Zalthor back more effectively. Their tactics, powered by Xander's newfound abilities, were proving devastating. But with every victory, the line between man and machine began to blur. Xander's grip on his own mind was slipping, and the question remained: would he be able to stop the symbiont from taking over, or would he become just another pawn in its deadly game? And even if humanity did win, what would they have become in the process? The war was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The Zalthor were still relentless, but now Xander had to fight not just for the survival of humanity, but for his very soul. The final battle was upon them. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and the faint hum of distant explosions. The once great Thalran city, a sprawling metropolis teeming with life and culture, now lay in ruins. The Zalthor had ravaged it beyond recognition. Towering skyscrapers had crumbled to dust, their glass and metal twisted into jagged remnants of a civilization lost. The city was now a graveyard, a symbol of the Thalron's desperation. It would also be the final stage of humanity's most crucial battle. Captain Xander stood at the front, his heart pounding with the knowledge of what was at stake. The symbiont had transformed him into something more stronger, faster, smarter, but with each passing moment, he felt the pull to embrace it fully, to give in to the power that had been gifted to him. His team, once just humans from Earth, were now something else entirely. They had adapted, just as Xander had, to become living, breathing weapons, their abilities enhanced by the symbiont's influence. But as much as they were now more than human, they were still driven by something profoundly human: a refusal to lose, to give up, to allow the Zalthor to wipe them from the universe. The Zalthor had not come unprepared. Resilience? They unleashed a new weapon and army of biomechanical creatures. A terrifying swarm of monstrous, hive-minded drones designed to annihilate anything in their path. These creatures, vast in number and nearly impervious to conventional weapons, were capable of laying waste to entire cities within hours. The Thalran, despite their desperate attempts to fight back, could do little against this new threat. Creatures seemed unstoppable, perfect embodiment of the Zalthor's ruthless nature, but humanity was not about to surrender. The Resolve's crew, now fully integrated with the symbiont, had become an unpredictable, lethal force. They were no longer just soldiers, they were Deathworlders, forged in the unforgiving crucible of Earth's harsh environments. They could adapt to any situation, and more importantly, they knew how to survive. Xander, ever the tactician, began to formulate a plan. With the Thalran's knowledge of their world and the humans' expertise in guerrilla warfare, they would use the very environment against the Zalthor. There was no denying the overwhelming odds stacked against them. But the humans knew something the Zalthor didn't. The environment itself could be a weapon. The humans set to work, using every scrap of knowledge, every piece of technology, and every ounce of creativity they had. They began to retrofit the city's ruins, turning it into a deadly maze of traps and defensive structures. The towering skyscrapers, still standing in defiance of the Zalthor's onslaught, became the perfect vantage points for Xander and his team to lay their trap. They used the city's old energy grids, once used to power the bustling streets, to create explosive charges set with precision across key choke points. The Thalran helped, offering their advanced knowledge of biotechnological weapons, but the humans were the ones who truly understood how to turn chaos into a weapon. As the Zalthor swarm advanced, the humans waited, biding their time. The biomechanical creatures, with their steely exoskeletons and overwhelming numbers, were relentless in their pursuit. But they didn't know the danger that awaited them. Xander, with his heightened reflexes and enhanced intellect, was the first to give the signal. With a single command, a series of traps exploded, tearing through the Zalthor ranks, throwing them into disarray. The humans, with their unparalleled ability to adapt, were everywhere, striking from the shadows, moving faster than the Zalthor could track. They had turned the Zalthar's own strength into their downfall, luring them into narrow streets, where their size and numbers worked against them. The battle raged across the city, a brutal contest of wits and survival. Every time the Zalthar adapted, the humans changed their tactics, using their knowledge of the environment to outmaneuver them. But even as they pushed back the Zalthar, Xander knew they couldn't hold forever. The biomechanical creatures were not the only weapon the Zalthar had left. The real threat lay at the heart of the Zalthar's Hivan, enormous pulsing core that controlled their swarm. Destroying it would be the key to ending the war, but getting to it would be nearly impossible. It was surrounded by the most deadly of the Zalthar's forces, and every step toward it was a step deeper into enemy territory. But the humans were Deathworlders. They thrived in the face of impossible odds. With a final, coordinated push, Xander and his team infiltrated the heart of the Zalthar's hive. It was a place unlike anything they had seen before, grotesque. Biomechanical structure, teeming with the Zalthar's most dangerous warriors. The air was thick with the hum of alien machinery, and the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Xander, fueled by the symbiont's power, led the charge. His soldiers followed, relentless, their movements swift and sure, guided by the singular drive to destroy the Zalthar's core. The final confrontation was intense. The Zalthar fought back with everything they had, swarming the humans, unleashing their most deadly creatures in waves. But the humans adapted, as they always did. They fought with the fury of Earth's most dangerous creatures, outthinking, outmaneuvering, and ultimately overwhelming the Zalthar's defenses. The destruction of the hive was swift, a massive explosion that shattered the heart of the Zalthar's power and sent their forces into chaos. As the dust settled, the humans stood victorious, battered but unbroken. The Thalrin, their allies in this desperate war, looked on in awe. The Zalthar had been defeated, not by sheer force alone, but by humanity's unyielding spirit, their ability to learn, adapt, and overcome. The battle was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. The Thalrin had learned something crucial. Humanity was not just a species to be feared, they were Deathworlders. No matter the odds, they would always find a way to survive. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted forever. Humanity had proven that their greatest strength was not their might, but their refusal to accept defeat. They had earned the respect of the Thalrin and the galaxy at large. And as they looked to the stars, one thing was clear. No enemy, no matter how powerful, would ever stop them.